Hi everyone, Daren Dean here. I thought I'd read an excerpt from my new collection. I'll still be here long after you're gone. This story was originally published in the Green Hills Literary Lantern, and it's called Bad Company. But I'm just going to read a little excerpt from it for you. I thought it seemed like a natural bridge from this book to the one that I'm working on, because Bad Company is an excerpt from The Black Harvest. And The Black Harvest is about the Civil War here in Missouri. And the story has characters based on historical characters like Quantrell and Frank and Jesse James, Bloody Bill Anderson, politicians from the time. And I just thought it'd be a good bridge from this book to that book. The Black Harvest is under contract with University of West Alabama's Livingston Press, and I've been working on edits of that book. So let me just read a little bit of this to you. It was 1888 when I handed over the ambrotype to Edwards. I had made it after I joined up with Bill Anderson's outfit as a gift for my mother. Edwards had arrived by carriage from Jefferson City in a desperate attempt to revive his own fame, attached though it was to the memory of Jesse James and the late war as his chronicler. By then it was plain to see that Edwards had the red-faced complexion of an alcoholic whose liver had long ago raised the white flag, but he still had some ambition that had helped the Democratic Party destroy the Radical Party and Lincoln's Republican Party. Years ago I'd rushed off with countless other young men, lying about my age of course, who had joined General Sterling Price down south at Wilson's Creek when a Union ball scored a direct hit on one of our cannons. It had flown through the air like brimstone straight from hell, killing the boy standing between Gideon and me, without leaving a single mark on either of us, save some blood and brains from the boy, if I recall correctly, was from Joplin. That's when the notion of serving under an officer left a foul taste in Gideon's mouth, which was transferred to me as my own opinion. I vowed to return home and fight no more. I was so naive. All of about 15 years old and a veteran after one battle. It was then my father decided I should take up the cross of our Savior and become an officer in the army of the Lord. I do not wish to sound disrespectful toward Father, because he was a man I loved above all other men. As much as I loved him, I did not want to be him. His grave face comes unbidden even now, a specter. Even without closing my eyes, I see his anomalous image hovering above the empty pulpit at night. But his visage has always been an indomitable one. You were, the sound of Edwards dragging on a cigar, a handsome young man, Mr. Marchbanks. Now, however. But then, sensing it might be inappropriate to discuss my physical frailty and jaundiced skin, he allowed his statement to hang in the air. He passed back the photograph of a daring ghost, bristling with navy colts, with as much fear as courage showing plainly in the set of his features around the frame. I was drunk, I coughed hog blood into his kerchief. I had just turned 43 and dying of the consumption, although I did not need to explain this to Edwards. I could have gone off to a sanitarium I'd heard about out west in the Rocky Mountains, but who wants to face their mortality head on? Besides that, I loathed most of the sawbones I had known, except for a few here, there, and yonder. Edwards took back the framed picture and set it nearby on the table face down. That photograph was made right here in Lafayette County. Well, Edwards exhaled a mist of blue smoke, intermingling heavily with memories of the dead. Even the journalists could not help entertaining the notion that the spirits might be invoked in the smoke when their names were called. What we agreed on then, Edward slipped a few coins across the table, but I quietly slid the money back. You see, I did not want to be bought. The journalist nodded, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into each of our glasses. I threw back my drink in a single motion to steady myself. But I was nervous because I wanted to get it right, if nothing else. Occasionally, the sound of Edward's nub scratching paper made its way into my consciousness, like the ostentatious proceedings of a spiritualist before he conjures the departed for his gullible old women. I owed it to all those dead boys and their families. Any time you want to tell it, you just go right ahead. I'm here. We want the truth about the war out this time. Frank and Jesse, now didn't you tell me you fought with them? He pursed his lips with skepticism and a palpable disgust that he'd had to consort with a personage no less than the Queen. His hands were blackened with his cheap newspaper ink. He gave the impression of a man who inhabited his own world, as I suppose some of the literary bent cannot help themselves. There was such a self-righteous zeal about him. He reminded me of one of Falstaff's men, and I couldn't help but dislike him intensely, despite his politics. He didn't remember, but I had seen him once before. Looked delicate when I rode into Boonville with Bill Anderson, and Bill had made a gift of dueling pistols to Price. I remember Price and Edwards about fainted when they saw all our scalps and ear garlands. What pussies, was what Bloody Bill said about them as we sat our horses near an ancient Indian burial mound overlooking the Missouri River. It amused me to taunt Edward, so I pushed my whiskey glass toward him with my fingertips. I fought with them crazy sons of bitches. They're not the heroes you make them out to be, or the devils others think, either. Funny, Edward said in a thinly veiled tone of contempt. Jesse never mentioned you. Well, he mentioned you. He told how you turned your back on him when he needed your help. I spat on the floor like I might get up and dispatch the journalist with my bare hands. Edwards flinched backward for a moment as I leaned forward, saliva flecks lightly spraying his face. I suppose the journalist reminded himself of reports of how I had gruesomely cut off ears, fingers, scalps, and even a federal head with a Bowie knife. Not an idle brag, nor something I'm proud to admit, but just a regrettable fact of the times. I believe he observed the former bushwhacker who appeared to just scarcely have himself under control, hands closing into fists, opening. The cords on my neck standing out, no doubt. It was the old feeling I used to get before the killing had to start, as we flanked the militia on their nags. Edwards dabbed at his blanched face with his handkerchief. Another memory overtook me during the journalist's interview. Ephron calling me into supper. Ephron brought her own brand of despair with her to the Marchbanks family when Father, the Reverend William Drury Marchbank, bought her in Liberty, speaking some foreign hoodoo language. But she revealed to me once that she had served in a brothel little more than a child in New Orleans, French Quarter. He'd been so taken with her, he brought her back to our place in Howard County, not too far from the Missouri River in the town of Glasgow. Her first name was recorded by the enumerator in 1850 with a dash and then mulatto. In the Bible, she couldn't read, her only possession. Mother allowed her. Flowers were pressed and dried like hope. Deep down, that hope was the only religion that she had allowed herself, even though it was faded. It was like a bullet wound that had been cauterized, but still constantly ached. She had been with our family for 3 years, and it was that time, in the memory of her that I would never recover from, although I did not know it at the time. She'd cooked all of our meals. I remember as a boy watching her in the summer months as she cooked in the kitchen out back. Her skin always smelled of bread and cinnamon, and now they were all gone. How tenuous our human relations are. When we are children, we believe things will always be as they are. Are you all right? Edwards nudged my forearm. Did I say I was drunk when that photograph was made? Because it wasn't the first time, I can guarantee you that. Just do your best, Mr. Marchbanks. Edwards relit his cigar with a lucifer match. His rhetoric turned evangelical. For the annals of Missouri history, for our common Southern cause. It didn't sound convincing, even coming from him. Now, perhaps at one time, he had been rabidly for the cause, but at this point, it sounded hollow, shattered. All right, well, that's it for now. Take care.